he sits at the helm of where I started my career years ago at Safaricom. But Andrew has over 18 years experience in the digital ecosystem. He's an engineer by profession, as I mentioned, and I'm a corporate member of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. He also has credentials including being an Acumen Fellow and supporting on emerging technologies, among others. And his role is really on high impact projects, establishing cloud and AI labs, which spearhead digital transformations. So for those who came yesterday, there was a heavy discussions on AI and where we fit into the role. And I'm sure Engineer Andrew will be telling us more about it. So karibu, Engineer. And then my final panelist is a lady I had the pleasure of meeting on the just concluded Design Thinking Hackathon, Miss Elaine Alowo Matovu. I hope I didn't slander it. She's a co-founder of North Green School, as well as Musizi University. And she'll tell us what Musizi means in a bit. So what she's been able to achieve, especially through North Green School, is affordable international school and curriculum. So they've been in existence since 2017. And she's also, and this is interesting, a lawyer by profession into the innovation and entrepreneurship space. So the learned friends, this is to tell you we move from one space to the other. And she's passionate about supporting the innovation and ecosystem across Uganda and Africa. She's an alumni of Makerere University. So those of you who dreamt of going to Makerere, you can do so via proxy through Elaine. So Elaine, welcome to Kenya and welcome to the panel. All right, yeah, so those are my panelists for this, I think, are we still in morning or it's afternoon? We have exactly 32 minutes before we wrap up the morning session. So I'm hoping that this will ensure that the session is good. So the exciting session today is going to be on reimagining university campus through design thinking. And I want to start off by mentioning, and I know it was mentioned as we started by Professor Chris here, that we did the design thinking hackathon. You can see the banner there. And in that room, and I can see some key stakeholders there, is we had high school students from M-Pesa Academy. I think M-Pesa Academy are there, so we can quickly wave. We had over 20 universities that applied, but those that participated is over 10 universities that participated. So again, that's amazing. And we had quite a couple of faculties that were there, as well as industry that was there to come in and mentor. We had industry players, as you can see on the banner at the side, Huawei, Microsoft, and NCBA, among others. And I'm happy to also see other corporate layers in this space. But I think that was the reason why that hackathon had to be done, is it becomes a side event or an opener to the Design Thinking Summit. And it's very crucial to the discussions we'll be having today, because that was happening. It was a 72-hour hackathon. I remember when we started it, we were not sure, are we going to do it? There were questions, how do you do a 72-hour hackathon? And we did it, and it was a success. Most importantly is I was impressed, and I'm sure Elaine was quite impressed, to find 15-year-olds doing better pitching and preparation than we even had the 20-something-year-olds. That was impressive, but probably it's a question of where we are and how we are moving. But of key importance, and I want to highlight the earlier discussion today, is we talked about, there was a discussion from one of, I think that's Steve, on authentic learning and how we measure it. But how do we bring in collaboration? I think that was also a key player. And the collaboration bit that came from that was, every team had to have more than one university or school represented. So we had teams that had universities and high schools. We had teams that had more than one universities. The winning teams did better collaboration and all that. And that is industry thinking in the real world, where you're going to come in, whatever workplace you are or whatever space, and it won't matter, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you come from, all right? So I wanted to give that nexus, and I think you saw the photos during this, before we came in. So hopefully you get to see more of that, and you experience, and you get to experience more of that, yeah. But anyway, let me start by throwing the questions to you. And I'll start by asking a question. Why is design thinking a critical approach for addressing challenge? In your own thing, do you think we should be sticking to the traditional methods of problem solving, or is it design thinking that is right, and why is it important? I'll give you, I don't know whether we have the mics in the room. You can add something interesting that we don't know about you and tell us why is it an important tool from where you sit, from the academia, from industry, as opposed to the traditional methods of problem solving. I think as we get the mics, you can still use mine. So that's to everybody.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So my background is marketing, actually. I started out as a marketing professional in advertising, and I went into banking. And the first place I got a sense of what design thinking is and coming up with human-centered design was when I was at IBM, which was pure technology. You know, we're just selling servers, software, hardware. Lenovo's used to be owned by IBM. And then I went into MasterCard, Financial Inclusion Lab, and there I was immersed wholeheartedly into coming up with solutions in agriculture, in education, in micro-retail, using the design thinking process. And part of what I was also doing was reaching out to the ecosystem, because we're funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we were asked to go into universities. So I actually went out into Riara University, by the way. We did a design thinking session there. We did Makerere. It was so much fun. It was MUBS. What is MUBS? Makerere University Business School. We tried University of Dar es Salaam. It didn't work. So I'm just sharing all this to say that I'm going to speak based on my experience using design thinking methodology to solve problems. Why should we or why shouldn't we? I think from what I've found is once you use design thinking methodology, which is basically, as the presenters have said, building or co-creating with your users or your customers from the get-go, what it does is it helps you move along the innovation ladder. So and a lot of us, I know we are super intelligent human beings. We're in the universities, we're academia. We all got straight A's in high school. Amazing. But sometimes we can be creating something in a product that we think in our own minds is wonderful. And most times it is. But then we find that we're solving the wrong problem. So one of the failures that I have personally experienced in the corporate world has been solving the wrong problem, basically climbing the wrong mountain. So design thinking helps you, because now when I think I am going to create a phone that can dance with me or teach me how to dance, and I want to be able to dance so that I can impress my teenage children, which, by the way, that is a real problem. When I do that, I need to involve the teenagers themselves when I'm designing this thing, when I'm thinking about the app, when I'm thinking about the product. So I think if there's anything I could say, it helps you move along the innovation process so that you're not spending a lot of money, effort, sleepless nights, and kumbe you're solving the wrong problem. So I'd say design thinking, for me, one of the most key things I'd say is it helps solve the right problem.
All right.
I'm sure my colleagues have something else to add.
So for the rapporteur, take note of that. All right. So engineer.
The mic works. Thank you very much. Indeed, it's a privilege and honor to be here with my colleagues on this panel to attend Kenya Innovation Week. Indeed, when it started about, was it 2 or 3 years ago, the vision was born out of spurring the innovation ecosystem within Kenya, and it's always a pleasure to participate. And today, before we start, I'd like to anchor most of my contributions and perhaps to try and throw in a new paradigm. I know we talk about design thinking, but as I talk today, keep in your mind design doing. Just repeat that.
Design doing.
Yes, so I will anchor most of my contributions around that. But other than that, it's also an honor to serve Kenya and now the rest of Africa through Safaricom. And glad to hear what M-Pesa Foundation Academy is doing, really to start the conversation, also to anchor part of the work which we do at Safaricom is basically to use technology and innovation to solve societal problems. M-Pesa is quite a hit nowadays. I remember when we were actually testing M-Pesa, it was not supposed to be as big as we have it today. It was actually an experiment, and I remember that time you had to do white papers upon white papers. I know this is familiar within universities. You know, you have to get your department, senate, go through the whole hoop to get it approved. Interesting enough, it reached a point where, you know, we didn't have valid data points, and a team was given a chance, go and try it out, and also using data and analytics. And this is the importance of design thinking as I prime the contribution, is that at times you may never know the destination. Usually we'd want to put things on paper, predict, you'll pass one, and therefore get to. I think in design thinking, there are also those parts that are not conventional. So part of it is also allowing things that may have a miss, and also to echo what Moses, our keynote speaker, spoke about, having, you know, a control domain. There won't be too much. But long story short, I think we are here with M-Pesa. How do you keep scaling your innovations? And also, the other thing why it's important, I know creativity is more on the artistic side of innovation and design thinking by extension. So design thinking actually is the scientific side of it. And what science does, not to say we need rigid structures, but for me, why design thinking? It increases chances of success from innovation. You can actually have accidental innovation where you do things by chance and they work. And there are a couple of examples, I won't quote them, but scientifically, if you use scientific methods through design thinking, then you're able to achieve success. And this is coming from studies we've developed with my team. We've been doing these studies for the past 4 years. And what we've discovered from the empirical evidence we've gone through is that, and there was a statistic actually in the keynote that 95% of innovations fail. However, with technology is also increasing the chances of innovation succeeding. And from the studies we've seen, it's about 30%. However, if you have design thinking, and now coming to the core of the definition of what I think design thinking is, you can easily go to a 70% using design thinking. And the key component is also contextual factors. Now, most of the concepts probably are borrowed, and you try to retrofit them into Africa. So the other key definition is, what does design thinking actually mean for Africa? And I borrow from our traditional commercial practices. Barter trade, you know, having small communities and clans, really that is at the nexus of our DNA. So what does design thinking mean in that space? When you talk about intellectual property, and Africa is a sharing economy, where what you have belongs to all of us, and it needs to be for our benefit. So also going back and really challenging and saying, how do we make design thinking very contextual for us within Africa? And happy to contribute, because design thinking also is multidisciplinary, and having different expertise, different points of view. And I liked the double diamond design thinking framework, because it's a funnel. And also to enrich something we've discovered in our findings is that you don't have a clear starting point. You can actually start anywhere in the double diamond design thinking. You could start from the product and retrofit it. You could start from the idea. So also is being open and having that circular way of having ideas that actually flow into and out of each other. So as you can tell, design thinking is quite broad, And hopefully through our discourse and engagement, we can find something small that we can start to work on, and hopefully next year we can come back and now we'll be talking about design doing. Thank you.
All right. I think we have a theme now for next year, Prof. Design doing. All right. Elaine?
Wangechi, because you are a land friend like me, and not to say that everybody here is not land. I mean, we are sitting in the presence of professors.
Yeah.
If I do not say that I have heard what my colleagues have said,
Yeah.
I agree and I have nothing useful to add. You will think me less of the person that I am.
Absolutely not.
So let me say that I have heard the words of my learned friends. I agree, and I have nothing useful to add.
All
so
right.
that we can proceed to the next question.
All
Thank you.
right. All right. That's a very nice one. So I think that's a very good. We needed to at least lay the foundation. So I'm going to then start. The next question is, innovation often thrives in environments like you guys have mentioned, where new ideas are actively nurtured. So from your point of view, what do you think universities need to do to embed design thinking in their culture and in their curriculum? And allow me to throw this to Elaine, just to hear from you before we go any further. So what do you think universities, and I'm sure we have quite a number represented, to make sure that design thinking is embedded in the culture and in the curriculum that we're doing?
I think I'm going to start by sort of going on a bit of a segue to say that universities exist to solve society's biggest problems. So what is that biggest problem? And within the context of Uganda, and you know, our relatives here in Kenya often look at us as the poor relations. But lately we are schooling you in some matters which I will not discuss here. Just to say that if you want to understand the potential future of your country, you might want to look at ours. But anyway, that's a side note. And I want to get out of here alive. But we've got a median age of 14 in Uganda, with a population that is probably going to be, is projected to be at 100 million by 2050. Now, median age of 14. Yes. So, in fact, Wangechi, let me tell you something interesting. I was yesterday years old when I discovered that I am in the top 3%. You know, there I am thinking I'm young, you know. We're just in that point where when they talk about the youth, I'm about to put up my hand and stand up, and they're like, no, 35 and below. Now you all know how old I am. And then I discovered that when we talk about the top 3%, I'm in that group. So that means that you're looking at a population bulge like we've never seen before. Because of that, can universities afford to work at the pace that we've been working on to solve the problems that we've been solving? I think it's not even a question of if, but it's a question of must. And it takes me back to the presentation that was made by our keynote address, by a keynote speaker who talked about the 4 wives and the 1 man. And his first question is, who is the customer in higher education? Because we often think about the student. Well, actually, it is to an extent, but it's also their parents who are paying for it. It's the communities that they are coming from that have set a lot of hope on them. It is the recipients of the black tax that we must all pay that are looking with hopeful eyes at this person that has been sent. So once we look at that, then we start to think, what then is the greatest problem and opportunity for us as players within the higher education space that we need to solve? And it's my new friend, Mr. Githi from African Nazarene University, over tea time, said that universities need to be thinking about facilitating learners to become, not to know. Now, if that's the case, we have no alternative but to fall back onto design thinking. because we don't have the luxury to, be romantic about theories and this sort of thing. We've got to be delivering young people who are ethical leaders, because with a population bulge, we're going to need a lot more people leading from a point of integrity, but who also are entrepreneurial to be able to solve, again, the job crisis and the work crisis that's looming and is only going to get worse, but also that are employable from the word go. And the only way I think that we are going to be able to do that is by leaning onto design thinking. So now, with that in mind, to come to the question, how do we make that a part of the ecosystem? Is by, first of all, redefining our role, our position through the design thinking process itself. By, number one, redefining, first of all, who is it that our client is, so that when we go through the process of empathizing, so that we can figure out what our role is, we are actually being relevant. And the sense of urgency is burning in our bellies. Because once we are steeped in it ourselves as a way of being, as a way of defining what our, for example, course content, I'm sure in Kenya, which is similar to Uganda, I'm not, well, maybe, but in Uganda, the degrees that the university teaches, I think, have to be reviewed every 5 years. So you'll have certain degree programs that, for example, are taken off your portfolio because they're no longer relevant. So as we then go through that process of deciding what are we teaching, what are the new disciplines that we should be focusing on as universities, that even as we do that, we are using design thinking as a process to do that, then that's the beginning of recentering it and of giving it a place. Because you cannot teach what you are not. So I think that's going to be one of our first and biggest challenges to, as Mr. Gidi said, to become, so that then we can facilitate young people to become.
To become, I hope you're taking notes of some of these keywords. I am in the presence of great minds today, and I'm happy to do that. Now, I'm going to throw this to Engineer Andrew here, and just because you're from an industry space, and often we see a gap between what the university is churning out and what the industry expects or what it needs, right? And a case in point, M-Pesa came in probably faster than we were expecting and all that. But as we think through our academic programs and even the kind of spaces that the academic spaces have, we're used to, the classroom setup and what halls and whatnot, and sometimes even the extracurriculum activities. So how can we rethink through that to make sure that the university, the programs it has, the spaces it has and all that is a conducive environment to churn what the industry needs? How do we bridge that gap?
Thank you very much for the question. And I think just to take a step back, I know you've gone to academic institutions, which is more than universities. But as my colleague was speaking, when you hear university, what comes to mind? And I think part of it is an offshoot, universe. When you think about the universe, it is broad, diverse, but ultimately things may seem to be in chaos, but the universe works. Aren't you breathing in oxygen? Aren't you walking and not tipping over, since there's gravity that is holding you? So I think when I hear universities, that's what comes to mind. And also, as part of this contribution, they're echoed as institutions of higher learning, which means learning takes place everywhere, anywhere, including here. But higher learning means it's actually at a pivotal point to actually impact the society. And it is with this realization that actually at Safaricom, we are very keen to support initiatives across universities. We do have our campus immersion tours. I know most of us here are my good friends because we visit your universities. But ultimately, to come to your question, and we came to a realization through a design thinking process. And part of it came from an internal reflection. And the internal reflection is that the batteries are out. So we came to a realization that the world is being driven by emerging technologies. And here is also to qualify a point that technology is not innovation and vice versa. And from this, we realized that, with technologies like AI and other emerging technologies, there's going to be, actually, in Africa, if we do not scale up, there's an opportunity of about $9.8 trillion that's at stake if we do not adapt emerging technologies. And what we discovered is that when we are getting students from our learning institutions, it was taking upwards of 6 months to actually get them to be able to deliver basic functionality within the organization. And through a design thinking process, because design thinking, you ask a lot of how can we questions, how might we, and basically a lot of the how. The why also comes in, but the how is actually prevalent. And we say to ourselves, is this problem only at Safaricom? So we spoke to other colleagues and within the private sector, and we realized there's actually a problem across the country. But ultimately in Africa, as I've had submissions from my colleague from Uganda, who we are still learning from about the future of Kenya. So from that realization, then we asked ourselves another question. What's the main source of talent in our organization? And from analysis, we found that majority do come from universities, but we also recruit self-trained, self-taught talent. But again, to qualify assures at least you have a certain level of delivery. Someone can come, do a presentation, they can be civil within a corporate setup. So that's the additional value for university, but also a challenge. Learning is taking place everywhere. So how do universities continue to redefine their space? And the long story short, we discovered that an ecosystem approach is what is required. And with some of us in the room, we came up with a quadruple helix innovation model. And this model has the private sector, public sector. We do realize that we need policies that enable initiatives to thrive. Academia was also at the centerpiece of it. And the key emphasis was not on curriculum, but rather on skills. So how do you bridge between curriculum and skills? But also we realize there are a lot of tech hubs and tech centers, part of what Kenya Innovation Week, Kenya, Anza Village, and the rest are promoting. So we put them as part of the COG. And we came up with what is called Industry Digital Talent Program. It's a concept that is growing from strength to strength, now in its second year. One thing I'm happy in terms of outcomes is most organizations have been able to borrow. We actually have over 60 organizations represented. They've been able to borrow the framework, and it's not about doing one big thing for everyone. It's about picking learnings and seeing how we do peer learning. So in this case, how universities can actually churn out products that are useful actually to the society, not private sector only. Because at Safaricom and other corporates, we exist to serve the population. Without the customers, there's no business. So from there, we came up with what we call a 70-20-10 learning model from that particular consortium. And what you're saying is 10% is actually what you learn in a classroom. when you look at delivering for the whole population. And as I'm talking about this, think about the river, the source, and the river finally draining into the ocean. So the university is the source of the river, and that's the 10% where you impart sort of a frame of thinking. Again, from the analogy of powers, to read. So it's to impart a frame of thinking, a way of doing things, a way of thinking about problems. And design thinking becomes critical as one of the key resources, but also one of the key components that could be infused in different points of the curriculum. When you think about our term projects that we do every semester, design thinking can be a way to actually do those projects. And I'm happy one of the keynotes, from Nazarene in terms of how do you examine certain courses like entrepreneurship needs to be practical, and design thinking can actually be modeled around that. But again, when I started, spoke about design thinking as a science, when I think about disciplines like management, strategic management, they actually came offshoots of engineering, economics, and same thing, design thinking can also be developed as a discipline in its own. And we can actually define what it means in Africa. And then we said 10% is critical and needs to be done well, and we participate in curriculum augmentation, because changing curriculum probably is a 5-year journey on average across most universities. But we could begin with augmentation, guest lecture sessions, practical industry visits, and the rest, and then to see how to build it into the curriculum. Now, the 20% is mentorship, where now we come to universities and we have a good model. If I can quote the M-Pesa Academy, we have also been a mentor. You actually pick a student and you work with them for a period of 1 year or so. So mentorship is key because it starts to drive the practical elements. And then the 70% is internship, and we've been able to offer upwards of more than 300 from this cohort. So the internship is linked to the initial curriculum that was developed. In this model, then, you'll have universities that don't have to second guess what the industry needs, because the industry is right there working with them, including a problem-based approach, and I'll dive deeper into this. When you think about the gig working economy, and I'm sure most of your students, when they are not in the classroom, they are busy doing the gig economy. And one thing which now we are attempting to do is to drive the gig economy through universities, where you can actually crowdsource and sort of open source your problems through that platform to universities, and you have your students do sort of a ballot, and they can pick the problems they want to solve. And in that way, now you have the problem-based approach being applied in practical terms. Some of the challenges were around intellectual property management, and I know we are talking to a couple of universities, again, to see how to unblock that. But that can be a very powerful way to actually drive universities, and also having continuous forums where we are able actually now to have the curriculum speaking to what the industry needs, and also the industry and all players seeking to solve societal problems. When we think about the current challenge that we are all facing, because ultimately most of us are citizens, or rather we live in this country, we enjoy products, whether it's from university, private sector, or government, is also to figure out some of the key challenges. And I think, as has been mentioned as well, population growth is a challenge and an opportunity. When we think about Nairobi as a city and the millions that we hold within Nairobi, how can we reimagine urban planning and design? Now, that's a big, area to look at. I know there are civil engineers there are urban planners. There's also a lot of policy discussion to be done. So to pick some of these challenges and see how do we address them. So on that note, I say there's an opportunity, through a collaborative approach. And I welcome us to actually look into IDTP on our portal, and you can look at the concept. Feel free to borrow as well. We can have discussions on how we can partner on this. Thank you.
All right, I think those are two learnings. One, we have a lot of learning from Uganda on the future of Kenya. And second is we have the IDTB from Safaricom. Now, I want to use these to remind us that told us that the median age in Uganda is 14. For Kenya is how old? 9, 10. Yeah, so you guys are teenagers. Huh? You're younger than us. But that's scary because also that tells you that yeah, there's clearly something to learn about the future of Kenya. But what is the actual age of a lot of young tech startups? Any guess? 20, I think around 23, 24. And now it's coming down to 21, closer to that. But the medium age is now the kids at M-Pesa Academy, and I'm glad that they impressed you and what they're doing. But these young kids at the age of 19, 20, 21, they are at universities. And we're expecting to churn them so that they go to the job market. And of course, the job market will tell you here, Andrew will tell you, I can only absorb this small percentage, right? And only have capacity to train and all that this. So the reality has hit us that a lot of startups are big.
What do? I'm